Welcome. We're talking to Lavina Thompson. Welcome to Live from Studio Venus. And Lavina is a writer here in Lethbridge, a published author.
Yes.
And so I wanted to chat with sort of your process, how you grew up, what inspired you to be a writer. So let's see. When you grew up, were you a writer? Were you that little kid that's writing?
Oh, I was always writing. I think I started writing when I was about probably 5 or 6. I do a lot of short stories, poetry, that sort of thing. I didn't really get into novels until I was older in my teenage years. I wrote a lot of fantasy. Writing was more just my survival mechanism, my coping mechanism for a traumatic childhood.
Right.
And so it just kind of carried on into my adulthood as still my coping mechanism and still a way I found a lot of healing, a lot of therapy, I guess.
Right. Which is kind of your one poetry book.
Yeah.
Or that you have that's called
Melting Candles.
Right.
Yeah.
And I thought I'm going to remember the name of that book because I burned the candle at both ends. So I'm going to remember that. But apparently I didn't. But because that book is really a book of poetry that also is you dealing with issues that were going on with your life, right?
It is, yeah. That was sort of my reflection on my traumatic childhood and the abuse, and it was also an exploration of how I survived and how I came to reach adulthood.
Yeah. Well, and it's great, and as artists, that's what we do lots of times, right? We use our art almost as our therapy.
We do,
right? Yeah. And so when you're writing, that's all there. It's inspiration isn't the right word, but
no, I can't think of
yeah,
it.
I can't either. Because you don't want to say inspiration because it makes it sound good, and it's not always good. What well, I guess does inspire good writing. You're a good writer. I enjoy your writing. And one of the sort of mystery series, would you call it a mystery series?
Yeah, it's a mystery police procedural series. It's called Beyond Dark.
Yeah.
And it follows the character of Alyssa, and she is a criminal profiler. She specializes in female serial killers. And then she gets this rookie partner come into the picture.
Yeah.
He's just kind of thrown at her because they got nowhere else to put the guy. So he comes in. His name is Thayer, and he is this little Russian biker. He's like covered in tattoos, and you can hear Alyssa's judgment from like a mile away. So they just have these opposing personalities. He's extroverted, he's melodramatic, he's funny.
Yeah.
And she's very introverted, she's quiet, she just kind of wants nothing to do with this. Leave her alone, let her do her thing.
Yeah.
So they have to learn how to work together. And as we find out later on, Thayer sort of has his own backstory that plays into his career.
Right.
And so they either have to learn how to work together and be civilized, they either have to become friends, or this just isn't going to work.
Right. And what gave you the inspiration, because it almost sounds a bit opposite, of having female serial killers and then a female detective that's kind of, going after them? It seems like I haven't heard that kind of storyline before.
Yeah. Alyssa's character came to me years ago from a Criminal Minds episode. I'm back in, I believe it was season 6. And it was the Ashley Seaver storyline where she was the daughter of a serial killer.
Right.
And she became an FBI agent later on.
Yeah.
And so she didn't stick around in the show, which I found highly disappointing. I was very fascinated with her character.
Yeah, I remember that now that you say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of let the character rest in, kind of the back of my mind there for a while. And then I got divorced in 2017.
Yeah.
And then in 2019, I kind of just pulled myself out of the depressive rut I was in.
Yeah.
Because I was also going through like a lot of therapy stuff for my childhood and everything at the time that crumbled apart.
When you were doing that, were you writing purely for going, I guess maybe that's nosy, but as you're going through all of that, is that when you're writing your poetry, or did you use writing, or could you not even write when you were in that state?
I had a really hard time writing in that state. A lot of my poetry in my book was from sort of my teenage years, my early adulthood years.
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff from the period after 2017 was sort of my rock star book that I was working on. I've been working on that for 6 years.
Yeah. Wow.
And then part of my depressive rut was I couldn't get the story right. I was feeling really discouraged.
Yeah.
And that was sort of when I decided I just need to work on something new, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was when I sort of plucked Alyssa back from the back of my mind, and I'm going, you've been there for a while.
Yeah.
Let's work with you,
Yeah.
Let's find you a story home. So I just sort of started building on her. And then it was just through writing sort of the first draft of Belladonna and getting to know the serial killer that I kind of went, I thought it'd be really cool to mirror Alyssa with the serial killer and their psychologies and their backgrounds and how they just ended up taking two different roads in life.
Oh, yeah, that's such a great way, to look at something, right? That we did take different paths, because that happens so often. You see that where someone,
it does,
yeah. And did you go to university for writing?
I did a journalism diploma at the Lethbridge College here.
Yeah. So that must have taught you something about writing.
It taught me a lot about writing, and a lot about editing, and a lot about sort of the production side, and that's your formatting, your layout, how the physical book looks.
Right. Oh, that's great, because you would, when I think of journalism degree, and we were talking about it being useful for you as a writer, I was like, wow, it's not something I usually thought. You've got the news, and then for you, you've got the creative writing. So you've got both of those hats that you can put on.
Yeah, and it's nice for the journalism aspect, and knowing that side of it it's a lot of fun for my books, because I also know the criminal psychology side. I know a lot of the police procedure side, but it's also really nice to know the journalism side of it and what you can and can't say.
Yeah.
And sort of how journalism works. So I can also incorporate that into the books.
Yeah. Oh, very cool. So, did you identify yourself as a writer as a young age?
No,
when did you take yourself seriously?
That was more so later in my adulthood.
Yeah.
And sort of right around 2012, kind of when that self-publishing explosion happened.
Yeah.
And Amazon and Kindle became really popular. That was sort of when I sat down and said, this is what I want to do. So
you mentioned as a writer how Amazon and Kindle, how those were useful for you. How is that for someone like me who's not used to that process?
It's easy.
Yeah.
It's not cheap for anyone who wants to go that route, because you do need an editor, you do need your cover art. It needs to be professional.
Okay.
A lot of the stigma in self-publishing revolves around the quality of the books that come out, be it the writing, the editing, the cover art. A lot of when self-publishing first sort of came about, there was a lot of lower quality books coming out.
Right.
But there's still a lot of high quality books, and as self-publishers, we are our own publisher, basically.
Right. Yeah.
So we're responsible for all that. Our creative freedom is also a responsibility, in that we need to ensure the book, you're competing with the big five or the big four as they are now.
Yeah.
So you're competing with the big publishing houses. So your book needs to be on par with that if you want to market effectively and be out there.
So who does your cover art?
I usually buy pre-made ones.
Yeah.
And so basically the pre-made sites are basically where artists can come and post their book covers.
Oh,
and
that's interesting.
you can kind of pick and choose the ones you want. You're still supporting other artists that way.
Yeah. I had no idea there was even anything like that. Yeah. That's kind of cool. So it is an area, and Amazon does so many things that we go tusk about. Yeah. But it is a format there that
it is
for artists.
Yeah, and Amazon's not your only option. You have Draft to Digital, you have Smashwords, you have Ingram Sparks, and they also do paperbacks as well. So there are other options out there. Amazon isn't your only one.
And so is writing part of your daily routine?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, so I write for a couple hours before I go to work. I write for a little while when I get home.
Wow. That's admirable. To have a habit that you're doing every day is great.
Yeah, it's just habit now.
Yeah. So it's something though that I think having a routine with something and having a discipline with something is where you're coming up with your books.
Absolutely, yeah. Because I also post them once a week to Booksy, and that's just kind of where my first drafts go. Right. And so that's really, so I post Beyond Dark on Fridays or Saturdays, and then I'll post Beyond Cover on Sunday night or Monday. And that's just so it keeps me going, gives me a routine, gives me something to look forward to every week, and then they just slowly get done.
And probably your readers too.
Yeah, my readers quite enjoy them.
Yeah, that's kind of a neat way in a way if you're reading a book and all of a sudden it's like, okay, next chapter. When's the next chapter coming out?
I have a couple readers who are like that. Like, I gotta know what happens next.
That's kind of nice, though. It's nice that you know that you have that.
It's encouraging.
Yeah, for sure. So is there a different process for writing your poetry and writing your prose?
I'm a lot more inconsistent with my poetry. That's more just kind of my emotional outlet.
Right.
Kind of where I return to just sort of when I need to reflect on things or heal or something. I'm trying to find the word for it and I can't.
That's okay. So when you're feeling down, right? When you've gone through that depression you were going through, was writing something that helped you out of it or something that you just couldn't really do at that point?
At first, at that point, it was really hard to stick with.
Yeah.
You know, and then once I sort of realized that my rock star story wasn't really going anywhere, I didn't know how to write it anymore, just because I'd gone through so many drafts of it and so many years of being with it.
Yeah.
It felt as basically as crumbled as my marriage did at that point.
Yeah.
So it kind of just fell into that stage where it was part of the old.
Yeah.
And so that was why I started Beyond Dark, was I just needed to start something new and start all over again and sort of refine myself as a writer again.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we can get into those creative ruts where we're working on the same thing for so many years and for so long, and then your personal life falls apart. You're just kind of like, okay, well, who am I even now?
Yeah.
You know, and that's a common thing after divorce is, who am I now?
Yeah.
And so I went through that simultaneously as a writer too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I kind of do that as when I'm painting. I've usually got at least 4 canvases on the go, because I'll go to start one and I'm just not feeling it at that point in the day, in my life, whatever. It's like, no, it doesn't appeal. Let's try this one or whatever. So it's something that kind of, depending how mood goes or where you're at.
Absolutely,
or how inspiration hits. Yeah,
absolutely. There's nights where I get home from work and I'll open Beyond Dark and I'll kind of look at my chapter and go, I don't know what I'm doing with this, but I had an idea for Beyond Cover, so I'm going to go work on that now.
Yeah. So our inspirations sometimes are the same even as a writer.
Absolutely,
And so do you sort of tuck those little inspirations away if you can't use them and use them for your next book? Or?
Oh yeah, I've got tons of notes. I've got tons of scenes that I've written ahead of time and just kind of tuck them away. Even when I'm editing, if I go and get rid of a scene, I never delete it. I just save it in another folder and save it for later, basically.
And do you look at the later? When do you look at the later? Your little pile of gems.
I usually look at those sort of right before I start the next book.
Oh, yeah.
So, for example, as I finished Belladonna, and I was starting book 2, which is Gravedigger, I went into the folder, and there's a scene in there that was originally going to be part of the ending of Belladonna that I took out because I was moving that specific storyline.
Yeah.
And now it's going to be the final scene for book 2.
Oh, wow.
So it's just recycling scenes, because sometimes you write it at a specific time of your life or a specific moment.
Yeah.
And you have that emotional attachment to it. I still want to use that.
Yeah.
But it's just not helping the story right now.
Yeah.
But it can help a story down the road.
I think that's part of good writers, or where you hear that writing, when you sort of say, nope, now I can take it, I'm going to use it over here. Yeah. And yeah, that's interesting. Cool. It kind of mirrors what I do, so I find that super interesting. But, well, I can't wait for your next bits of books, I should say, not bits, your next books. And what we'll do is, if you give me all of the links to all those wonderful books that we can read online and see. And so, yeah, we'll make sure we put that down in the comments. And thanks so much for joining me.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, cheers.
Purple floral fabric swung around her legs when she twirled before a full-length mirror, long locks of gold dancing over her petite shoulders. She pulled on the lilac denim jacket and paused, hands on her hips, amber eyes ablaze as she stared, her smooth hands straightening the cotton skirt. She viewed herself from the side, the slender figure that had gained 5 pounds, making her scream at the scale. "You're hideous." She turned to the desk and sat, crossing her legs and straightening her back. She put on a pair of lace white gloves, picked up a black pen, and began writing in the pink floral notebook already open to the top page, where she'd previously torn out others. "I am you when I gaze in the mirror. You were exquisite, perfect, contagious laugh. Your friends adored you. I saw how that man looked at you like you were diamonds. But you were free, so free, to yourself and to your dreams. Are they your own dreams? Was this life everything you ever wanted? You were brimming with vivaciousness and femininity, genuine. I never heard you speak a harsh word or gossip. I am not like you. I am surrounded by beautiful things, but I am not one of them. I am poison to anyone who tries to love me, poison to all. I was poison to you. I only wanted to be you, free, loving, not trapped in this cage, these walls. I am not like you. I am surrounded by beautiful things, but I am not one of them. I am poison to anyone who tries to love me, poison to all. I was poison to you. I only wanted to be you, free, loving, not trapped in this cage, these walls, where the ghost still lives, not trapped in the skin of this vile, hideous thing one might call a woman. At my basic appearance, I want to tear my skin off and bleed out. But then I wear your clothes, put on the mask, wear your aesthetic. Then I feel eloquent once more, only because it's you. But the eyes, I can never escape my eyes. I am poison in your veins. I am something treacherous in these shadows. I am alone, and I deserve to be. I gain weight, I mess up my makeup. I mess up a line on camera or at an audition. I pose the wrong way for a photo. I smile when I'm supposed to be cold and hard. I take off my clothes and wash off my makeup at the end of every day and stare into the mirror at every flaw, every bit of fat showing, every skin blemish, and every inch of me so horrendous to look at, and I wonder, am I still beautiful? Will I ever be? Womanhood is the murderess, not me. With shaking hands, she set the pen down and gently tore out the pages. She pulled an envelope from the drawer, scribbled down an address with no return, and put the letter in it. Using water from a nearby glass, she sealed the envelope before adding the stamp. She stood up in shoes she could never fill, straight off a dead woman, grabbed her purse, and set the letter inside. Pausing at the mirror, she adjusted her hair, checked her makeup, and straightened the dress before leaving, keeping her lace gloves on. She locked the door and strolled down the sidewalk. She paused at a postal box and put the letter inside before continuing on, catching a bus to vanish into the city. Belladonna needed a new mask. And we'll go to the next scene.
And that was an excerpt from
the book, yeah. That was like the killer writing her journal entry, or the letter that she eventually sends.
So these are all from the same book?
Yes.
The latest book. Okay.
Yeah. A yellow taxi pulled up to the apartment building, the street silent and vacant except for a blue-haired woman in sunglasses who popped onto the screen, fretting over Julia, who stumbled out of the back seat into what she thought were Lisa's arms. Julia's shoulders slouched in relief. Alyssa leaned over Thayer's shoulder, watching as the cab driver and woman exchanged words. She scowled and slammed the door before the cab left. She watched it turn off the street, then returned her attention to Julia, who could barely stand. The woman helped Julia toward a dark blue Ford Focus, parked down the block, guiding Julia into the back seat. Julia stumbled in, and the woman closed the door and got into the driver's seat. She drove away as casually as having picked up a best friend. "We need to run that plate, but it played out as we figured. Go back and get that plate now." "Never mind," Alyssa said, fingers tapping the desk. She stepped back. Thayer grinned, returned to the frames where the car left, and zoomed in on the plate. He jotted the number down and handed Alyssa the sticky note. She went to her desk, logged into her computer, and entered the plate number into a system search engine. "Amy Lane is who it goes to," she said before she ran the name. "And it's fake. It goes to falsified registration and ID." "Either she knows sketchy people or she knows her way around the dark web," Thayer said. "Maybe both." Alyssa cursed, took off her cap, and ran a hand through her hair. Right as it seemed like they might close in, the door had slammed shut on another lead. She knew Lisa left the pub first and that Julia would come home sick. We don't see Lisa coming home at all. Her car never showed up. The unsub arrived with blue hair and glasses at 3:15, arriving in a different car. The cab arrived right around 3:25. The unsub had Julia in the car and was gone before the clock hit 3:30. Lisa didn't come home until 4 a.m. "That wouldn't give Lisa much time to spend with a victim," Thayer said. "We need to find out where Lisa was regardless. She needs to be honest with us. She didn't go straight home, and that looks bad on her." "I agree," Thayer said. "This killer is far more organized than most males I've read about." "Women tend to be," Alyssa said, putting her cap back on with a disgruntled sigh. "Because of that level of organization, female serial killers have been known to be active for twice as long as males. The average male serial killer gets caught at roughly the 4-year mark. Females can go as long as 8 years, often more, as they target family, friends, or patients. This is an odd case then. Stranger on stranger murders, letter sending, the need for attention. It's not so intimate, and yet it's still personal," Thayer said thoughtfully. "Poison is where she's being true to precedents." "Yes. The quiet place where she takes her victims is likely her own home or a space where she is comfortable and private. Jealousy is a motive as old as time. With the amount of self-pity in her letter, I wouldn't be surprised if we found an arsenal of envy between her narcissism, her dying career, and her mother. How common are female serial killers, Thayer asked. I'm curious. I guess I feel like destroying my will to ever date again. Alyssa picked up her coffee mug and snickered. 1 in 6 serial killers is a woman. Thayer's smirk disappeared. Seriously? Seriously, Alyssa said. No one wants to believe women are capable of being monsters. We expect it from men. But I can say from experience that women can be some of the most sadistic human beings out there. Sometimes you never really know a person. And onward to the third one.
It's very engaging.
Thayer being a smart aleck.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, Lorley, don't laugh out loud. So Mike picks it up.
I know, right? I had to try not to laugh out loud as I'm reading.
I know. Well, I could hear the smile in your voice, which is cool, right?
Yeah. Try not to make it boring, right?
Yeah.
Okay. After requesting and obtaining footage from the businesses within a few blocks from the hotel, Thayer hid in the CPU tech analyst's office while studying the video, wanting an escape from the chaos in the unit. Come out, he said, holding the mouse icon over the pause button. Come out where I can see you. He started from when Alana left the hotel. She looked back fearfully seconds after the stalker slipped into the alley. Alana waved at a taxi to pull over, glancing over her shoulder before she got in. Thayer hit pause. In the notebook beside him, he wrote down a question. How long was Alana being stalked, and did she know before the night of the murder? Play. The cab pulled away with no sign of the stalker. Thayer let the video keep rolling, mouse icon poised over pause. The figure in black crept out, gazing toward the street, facing away from the cameras. Pause. Snapshot. Got you. Now where did you go from here? Play. The stalker went back the way they came. Thayer clicked through various cameras. At the end of the street, the stalker removed their hood. Thayer banged his fist on the desk when the footage ran out, cursing in Russian. You would! He rewound the footage and returned to the second the hood came off, revealing short, dark hair. He paused and tilted his head. Of the 2 suspects, Yoli was confirmed to have brown hair, though it didn't mean Natalie couldn't wear a blonde wig too. With a frustrated sigh, he made a note in his book to request further footage. That shot was vital to revealing the stalker's identity. You sound like a guy who could use a coffee, Alyssa said from behind him. Her sudden presence made him jump in his chair. She leaned in the doorway, smirking at his reaction. He glanced from her to the empty to-go cup from lunchtime before he tossed it in the garbage bin. She came in and handed him a fresh coffee, setting hers down. Thank you, he said, giving her a surprised look. Stalking me as I stalked the stalker. Something like that, she said, pausing behind him. The anger and distance weren't gone, but had eroded to the exhaustion beneath her tone. Thayer spun in his chair to face her. Who did that to you? Caught off guard, Alyssa tilted her head and looked at him like he was crazy. What are you talking about? This, you being so... He couldn't bring himself to say the word to her face. It felt too much like throwing it at her after she'd spent the last few weeks struggling through this case. Too insensitive. She put a hand through her forehead. Are you really doing this now? You've said maybe 3 sentences to me in 2 days over a professional disagreement. You took that awfully personal. He waited in the silence that fell between them, compassion filling his eyes. She looked away as though she couldn't stand the sight, rubbing the back of her neck. I did not come in here for a therapy session. It doesn't need to be. The truth is, ma'am, I have a pretty good idea of what happened to you. You relate too closely with this killer, with maternal narcissism, with narcissism in general. Don't do that, Alyssa said abruptly, raising a hand. Don't what, care? He said. Alyssa threw her hands up, traces of a long-suppressed sob she tried covering with anger. Yes, that. Can you stop being so fucking empathetic for 5 minutes? Is that what's getting under your skin, my empathy? Thayer asked in confusion. No, well, yes, but... Alyssa said, crossing her arms and glancing out the door. I can't talk about this, not right now. You don't need to, Thayer replied, his voice gentle, but can I say something? When she nodded, he sat up straight to continue. You like to think you can do everything alone, and most of the time you can. But right now you need to know you don't need to. I'm here. Alyssa shook her head. Yeah, how many times have I heard that? Everyone leaves. I'm used to it. I haven't. Thayer said, stopping short of telling her that he didn't have much choice in the matter. Give it time. You know, pushing people away won't keep anyone around. But I respect you, and I know you're struggling. You're cracking. You aren't invisible or invisible. Whatever is hurting so badly, it matters. You don't need to talk to me. But let me help you, at least with this case. Let me handle things when you struggle. I can't do anything if you don't let me. She gazed at the floor at a loss for words. When she didn't say anything, Thayer let out a breath. Are we okay? Can we work together and catch this killer without the hostility, he said. Alyssa took a deep breath and nodded. I'm sorry, she said in a whisper. Is that why you brought me coffee? I was worried it was poison, Thayer said with a teasing smirk. A small laugh escaped Alyssa, giving her a moment to recompose herself. Thayer spun back to the computer screen with a triumphant grin. It wasn't much. Tension still weighed heavily over her, though Thayer sensed that was a permanent cloud she carried to accompany the stress and agony of this case. But it was a tiny sliver of relief. Keep up the smart-ass remarks and the next one might be, she said as she sat beside him, her expression growing serious once more. What have you found?
It's great.
That's one of my favorite scenes.
Yeah, it is.
I love those two.
They are. They're great together.
They're funny.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I think that will add a lot.
I think so, yeah.